picture standing at the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, the Coricancha. From this central point, these imaginary lines called Seikes stretched out toward the horizon, creating this incredible web that organized their entire society. It wasn't just about navigation. These lines structured everything from political hierarchies to religious ceremonies.
So it was like an ancient version of our modern organizational systems. How did they record all this information?
That's where it gets really interesting. They use these amazing devices called Quipus. Think of them as three-dimensional databases made entirely of knotted ropes. The Inca inherited this system from the Wari civilization and transformed it into something extraordinary during their imperial expansion.
You know, I've seen these in museums. They look like elaborate macrame. But how exactly did they encode information?
So here's a practice question for you. How would you design a system to record complex data using only rope and knots? Take a moment to think about it.
Well, that really makes you appreciate their ingenuity. How did their actual system work?
They created this brilliant hierarchical structure, starting with a main cord like the trunk of a tree. From there, they'd hang pendant strings. These were your primary categories. Then, and this is where it gets clever, they'd attach secondary strings, and from those, even more auxiliary strings. Each knot, position, and color had specific meaning.
That's remarkable how these ancient systems continue to influence modern thinking. I've heard artists have been particularly inspired by them.
Exactly. Like throughout the 20th century, artists such as Elena Izcue and Alejandro González Trujillo, who went by Apurímac, incorporated quipus into their work. And then you have Jorge Eduardo Ayelson, who in the 1960s started experimenting with different materials on canvas, almost creating modern interpretations of these ancient recording systems.
So what do you think we can learn from these ancient systems today?
You know, here's another question to consider: what modern technologies might benefit from the Incas' integrated approach to information management. Think about that for a moment.
That's such an interesting way to think about modern innovation.
The story of Candido Portinari completely flips our assumptions about artistic success.
That's such a fascinating way to look at it. How did he manage that incredible transformation from portrait copyist to cultural icon?
Well, it all started when he was just 15 years old. Imagine sending your teenager off to Rio de Janeiro with nothing but a second-class ticket and dreams. His parents must have either been incredibly brave or incredibly desperate.
And he had to get creative really quickly to survive in the big city, right?
Oh man, did he ever. He basically invented this brilliant hustle painting portraits from photographs. You know, this was way before Instagram filters or Photoshop. He'd take these small black and white photos and transform them into these gorgeous, full-sized painted portraits.
That's actually quite innovative for that time period, like a 19th century version of a digital artist, but with oils and canvas instead of pixels.
Exactly. And here's what's really clever: while he was doing this commercial work to pay for his studies at the Escuela Nacional de Bellas Artes, he was basically getting paid to perfect his technical skills. Imagine getting paid to practice.
Well, that practical experience must have given him such a solid foundation for his later work. You can't just jump straight into being an innovative artist without understanding the basics.
You know what's wild? By 1988, this kid who started out copying photos became so significant that the Brazilian government put his face on the 5,000 cruzado note. And not just his face, they included his artwork Tiradentes on one side and showed him drawing baianas on the other.
The symbolism of that is just so powerful, from making money by painting to literally being on the money itself.
And this was during this crazy period of inflation in Brazil, when they were printing everything from 10 to 10,000 cruzado notes. Like, the fact that they chose him for the 5,000 note really shows how much cultural weight he carried.
Looking at his 1938 work, Coffee, you can really see how far he evolved from those early portrait days. The style is just so distinctively his own.
That's what I find so fascinating about his journey. He didn't just succeed, he completely transformed himself as an artist. Those early years of practical work weren't just about survival, they were laying the groundwork for something much bigger.
So, what do you think this tells us about the path to artistic success?
Well, I think it completely challenges this romantic notion we have about artists needing to suffer for their art. Portinari shows us that sometimes the most practical path, actually making money from your skills, can lead to the most artistic freedom later on.
That's such a relevant message for today's young artists who might be struggling with the idea of doing commercial work.
Absolutely right. And you know what's really interesting? When you look at his later works, you can actually see how those early portrait copying days influenced his style. All that attention to detail, understanding of human features, it became part of his artistic DNA.
The way he approached his career seems almost modern, like he was an early example of an artist entrepreneur.
And that's really the key takeaway here. Success in art doesn't always come from waiting to be discovered. Sometimes it comes from being willing to start wherever you can, even if that means enlarging photographs for paying customers while you dream of something bigger. Arizona, where you can travel from Mexico to Canada in just a few hours of hiking. These incredible sky islands are revolutionizing how we think about isolated ecosystems.
Hold on, you're saying we can experience multiple climate zones in a single hike? How does that work?
Well, these sky islands are essentially mountains that rise dramatically from the desert floor, creating distinct elevation zones. At the base, you're in 100-degree desert heat, but climb just 6,000 feet and the temperature drops by 30 degrees, completely transforming the ecosystem.
That's fascinating. What kind of biodiversity are we talking about here?
These islands support over 7,000 species of plants and animals, including 500 types of bees and 200 species of butterflies. But here's what's really incredible. Scientists have discovered that some species, like the Mount Graham red squirrel, evolved in complete isolation, similar to Darwin's findings in the Galapagos.
Speaking of natural wonders, I've heard you mention something about crystals earlier. How do they tie into this discussion of unique environments?
Well, that's actually a perfect connection. You see, these mountains contain remarkable mineral deposits, including quartz, amethyst, and calcite. Each of these crystals forms under specific conditions that tell us about Earth's geological history.
I've always wondered about those purple amethysts. What makes them that particular color?
The purple comes from iron impurities and natural radiation affecting the crystal structure. But get this, ancient Greeks believed amethyst could prevent intoxication. They even made wine cups from it.
That's wild. And what about calcite? I've heard it has some unusual properties.
Oh yeah, calcite exhibits something called double refraction, where light splits into two beams passing through it. Vikings actually used calcite crystals as navigation tools, calling them sunstones, to locate the sun on cloudy days. Recent experiments have proven this method could actually work.
So nature has been providing solutions to human problems for centuries. That reminds me, you mentioned something about banana peels earlier.
Right. This is amazing. Banana peels contain a protein that can bind to heavy metals and water. Recent studies show they can remove up to 65% of copper and 75% of lead from contaminated water supplies.
Wait, we've been throwing away a natural water purifier this whole time?
Exactly. And that's just the beginning. These peels are packed with potassium, magnesium, and other minerals. Some communities are now using them to make natural fabric dyes, while others are creating banana peel flour that contains 30% more antioxidants than regular flour.
It's incredible how these seemingly unrelated topics, sky islands, crystals, and banana peels, all demonstrate nature's efficiency.
You know what's really fascinating? Each of these examples shows how isolation can lead to innovation, whether it's species adapting in sky islands, crystals forming under precise conditions, or communities finding new uses for waste products.
That's such an interesting perspective. How do you think these discoveries might impact future research?
Well, scientists are already using the sky islands as natural laboratories to study climate change adaptation. The crystal formations are helping develop new technologies in electronics. And those banana peel properties, they're inspiring new approaches to water purification in developing countries.
So what you're saying is that nature has been running these experiments all along, we just needed to pay attention?
Precisely. And here's the thing, we're probably only scratching the surface. These discoveries suggest there are countless other natural solutions hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be understood and applied.